December 20th, 1943, 11:45 hours. 25,000 feet above northern Germany, the air is burning, explosions tear through the clouds as anti-aircraft shells burst around a formation of B-17 flying fortresses, American heavy bombers limping home from a raid on Bremen. Inside one of them, ye old pub, 21-year-old Lieutenant Charlie Brown grips the control yoke with bloodied hands. His bomber is shattered. One engine is gone, a second sputters in flame, and the tail gunner lies dead. The oxygen system is destroyed. Frost crawls across the inside of the fuselage. 11:47 hours, the German sky glows orange from distant fires below. Brown's crew, 10 young men from across America, fight to stay alive inside a dying aircraft. The bombardier is unconscious. The waist gunners are bleeding. The radio is dead. The bomber is drifting off formation, a crippled silhouette against the winter sky. Suddenly, movement below. A dark shape rises through the haze. A Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighter climbs toward them, sleek, fast, and deadly. 11:50 hours, the German pilot, Franz Stigler, a veteran ace with 27 victories, spots the bomber. Through his gun sight, he sees the heavy machine, slow, wounded, and alone. A perfect target. Inside his cockpit, Stigler's hand tightens on the trigger point. One short burst and this B-17 will fall from the sky, but then, something stops him. 11:52 hours. He closes in, just 50 feet from the bomber's tail. Through the jagged holes in the fuselage, he sees faces, terrified, bloodstained, exhausted. He sees one man kneeling over another, pressing a bandage to a wound, another tending to a gunner too weak to move. Stigler exhales slowly. His finger eases off the trigger. He circles to the right, pulling alongside the American aircraft. For the first time, the two pilots lock eyes, one in a Luftwaffe fighter, the other in a broken flying fortress. The sky between them goes silent. 11:54 hours, Brown stares back, expecting death, but instead of fire, the German pilot nods. He motions with his hand, turn east, land, surrender. Brown shakes his head. He points west, toward England. He will not land in Germany. He will not abandon his crew. Stigler hesitates. He knows what this means. If he lets them go, it's treason. If anyone sees him sparing the enemy, he'll face a firing squad. 11:56 hours, for a moment, the two aircraft fly side by side, one predator, one prey, both suspended between duty and mercy. Then Stigler makes his choice. He pulls ahead, flying alongside the crippled bomber as it drifts toward the North Sea. Below them, German anti-aircraft batteries prepare to fire. Until they see the Bf 109 escorting it, they hold their fire. For several minutes, the German fighter shields the bomber from ground guns, guiding it safely beyond the coast. Then, over open water, Stigler looks again at the shattered machine. He raises his hand to his helmet, and salutes. Charlie Brown watches in disbelief as the German fighter rolls away and disappears into the clouds. No gunfire. No vengeance, only mercy. 12:03 hours. Ye old pub limps across the sea, its wings trembling, the engines coughing smoke. Against every law of physics, the bomber reaches the English coast. A traf seething, ground crews gape in silence as it lands, riddled with holes, barely intact. 11 wounded men aboard, one dead. The aircraft never flies again. In the debriefing room, Charlie tells his commanding officer what happened, the German pilot who escorted them, the salute, the mercy, the officers. Response is immediate: never speak of this again. If word spread that Luftwaffe pilots could show compassion, it could shatter morale, weaken resolve, humanize the enemy. The order is final: silence. Charlie obeys. The war continues. He flies more missions, finishes his tour, returns home to West Virginia. But something stays with him. A single image, the German pilot in the cold December sky, looking at him through the canopy, choosing not to kill. Years pass, the world moves on, but for Charlie Brown, the war never ends, the nightmares never stop, and beneath them all, one question remains: who was he? December 21st, 1943, 6:10 hours. RAF seething, England, the morning after the impossible landing, the B-17-year-old pub sits alone on the tarmac, its skin shredded by cannon fire, its tail nearly severed, its wings held together by twisted metal and luck. Ground crews walk in circles around it, whispering, how had this thing stayed airborne? No one has ever seen a bomber this destroyed make it home. Inside the debriefing hut, Lieutenant Charlie Brown sits in silence. His flight suit is still streaked with oil and blood. He recounts the mission, the attack over Bremen, the fighter that appeared, and the German pilot who chose not to finish them. Across the table, his commanding officer lowers his voice. Forget it ever happened, Lieutenant. Don't tell your crew. Don't tell anyone. Do you understand? Charlie nods. But something in him tightens that he doesn't understand. How do you forget the moment your enemy saved your life? 1944, 1945. Charlie finishes his combat tour. He flies more missions, earns his promotions, and returns home to West Virginia when the war ends. But the war never truly ends, not for him. At night, he wakes soaked in sweat, hearing engines sputter, hearing men cry out in the dark. He dreams of fire, metal, silence, and the German pilot's eyes. He marries, studies on the GI Bill, rejoins the newly formed U.S. Air Force in 1949, serves across Europe, then Southeast Asia. For 2 decades he wears the uniform again, a quiet man with a haunted stare. When people ask about the war, he smiles faintly and changes the subject. 1965, Washington, D.C. Colonel Charlie Brown retires after 23 years of service. He accepts a post with the U.S. State Department. Traveling through Laos and Vietnam, watching new wars unfold, younger men repeating old mistakes. By the early 1970s, he settles in Miami, Florida as an inventor, raising a family. To his neighbors, he's calm, polite, ordinary, but to his daughter, he's a man who sometimes wakes in terror, whispering to no one, "He spared us, he spared us." Meanwhile, December 20th, 1943, near Bremen, Germany. As ye old pub limped out of sight, Franz Stigler lowered his Bf 109 toward an airstrip near the coast. He shut down the engine, stepped onto the frozen runway, and stared into the sky. The bomber was gone. His heart pounded, not from combat, but from what he'd just done. He could never tell anyone. If his commanding officers discovered he had escorted an enemy to safety, he'd face court-martial, possibly execution. In Nazi Germany, mercy was treason. Stigler cleaned his aircraft, logged a routine patrol, said nothing. That night, he lay awake in the barracks, remembering the faces through the bullet holes, the wounded, the dying, the terrified. He thought of his commanding officer, Gustav Rodel, who had once told him, "If I ever hear of you shooting a man in a parachute, I'll shoot you myself. You fight with honor, or you die with it." That day, honor meant restraint. It meant seeing the humanity in the enemy, but in the world he lived in, that kind of honor had no place. May 1945, Germany collapses. Stigler survives the final days, the chaos of defeat, the ruins of his homeland. He watches his country crumble, his airfields destroyed, his comrades gone. He buries his brother, his squadron mates, his youth. He tells no one about the American bomber. The story lives only in his memory, a silent truth in a world that wants no part of it. 1953, Vancouver, Canada. Franz Stigler steps off a ship and breathes the cold Pacific air. He has left Germany behind forever. He marries, finds work as a mechanic, then a businessman. He builds a new life, far from the ashes of Europe. But some nights, when the wind howls across the North Shore mountains, he remembers that bomber, the holes in its skin, the men inside. The young pilot who stared back through the frost. They were like men hanging from parachutes. He would one day say, helpless, "I couldn't shoot." 1960s, 1970s. Both men lived their separate lives, one in America, one in Canada, unaware of each other's existence. They passed through the same decades, breathed the same post-war peace, haunted by the same 10 minutes in the AIR. Charlie's dreams. The Messerschmitt still appears, its nose guns glinting in the sun. The silent salute before it vanishes into the clouds. In Franz's memory, the B-17 still limps through the air, its crew wounded, yet defiant, disappearing toward the west. 2 lives, bound by one act of mercy neither can forget. 1986, Boston, Massachusetts. 43 years later. A gray-haired Colonel Charlie Brown, now 64, stands among fellow veterans at the Gathering of Eagles, a reunion of combat pilots from every era. It's the 50th anniversary of the Boeing B-17's first flight. A journalist asks him quietly, "Colonel, was there a mission you'll never forget?" Charlie hesitates, then, for the first time since the war, he tells the truth: the crippled bomber, the German fighter, the escort to safety, the salute. The room falls silent, when he finishes, people surround him with questions. Who was that German pilot? Did you ever find him? Did he survive the war? Charlie shakes his head that he's carried that question for 43 years, and now, for the first time, he feels ready to seek the answer. That night, in his Miami home, Charlie sits at his desk surrounded by old mission reports, maps, and faded photographs that he opens his notebook and writes 3 words across the first page: find the pilot. He doesn't know where to begin, that he only knows that somewhere, out there, is the man who saved his crew, and he needs to thank him before it's too late. June 1986, Miami, Florida. 43 years since that December mission, Colonel Charlie Brown, now retired, sits surrounded by maps, flight logs, and faded letters from his old squadron. He can still feel the shudder of the bomber's frame, hear the rattle of flak, see the Messerschmitt silhouette through the smoke. He has lived a full life, yet that single moment in the German sky has never released him. That night, he begins his search. June 28, 1986, 20:15 hours, Charlie writes his first letter to the U.S. Air Force Historical Office in Washington that he requests any documentation on Luftwaffe pilots operating near Bremen on December 20, 1943. That he notes, 1 Bf 109 escorted my B-17 out of German airspace. I need to know who he was. Weeks pass. Then months. The answer returns. No record found. Charlie sends another letter, this time to the West German Air Force Archives, another to the Army Air Forces Historical Society, then to the Imperial War Museum in London. Each reply is the same: records incomplete. Files destroyed. No pilot identified. 1987, Miami. The calendar turns. Charlie is now 65. Every day he combs through declassified documents, mission logs, memoirs. Every night, he dreams of the salute, that wordless moment frozen in the clouds. Sometimes he wakes thinking he heard the roar of engines again. His wife worries. His daughter remembers him sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by letters, shaking his head in quiet frustration. Why does it matter after all these years? She once asked. He answered softly, because he mattered. 1988, dead. Ends. 45 years after the war, the trail has gone cold. German records are scattered, many destroyed, others buried in archives divided between East and West. Every clue dissolves into another uncertainty. Still, Charlie refuses to stop. He begins calling veteran groups, writing to old pilots, posting notices in military newsletters, hundreds of phone calls, hundreds of rejections. He tracks down airmen who served near Bremen that winter. None remember such an incident. 3 years pass. 4. The dream begins to fade, but the need for closure never does. 1989, a new idea. Charlie realizes that official channels have failed him. So he writes his own story. He drafts a letter for a publication called the Combat Pilot Newsletter, a journal read by veterans on both sides of the war, American and German alike. He writes in simple words, December 20, 1943, returning from Bremen in a B-17 named Ye Old Pub, our aircraft was crippled and alone. A German pilot in a Bf 109 appeared beside us. He did not fire. He escorted us to the coast, saluted, and turned away. I owe my life, and my crew's lives, to him. If he still lives, I want him to know, we made it home. He includes everything he remembers, the markings on the Bf 109, the snowy landscape below, the salute. Then he mails the letter and waits. Vancouver, Canada, January 1990. Thousands of miles away, Franz Stigler, now 74 years old, sits at his desk with a cup of coffee. Outside, snow drifts against his window. He flips through a copy of that same newsletter. Then his eyes stop. The date, December 20th, 1943. The details, Bremen. A B-17, riddled with holes. A salute. His heart freezes. He reads the paragraph again. The man he spared, the bomber that limped away into the clouds. It survived. For 47 years, he had wondered, had they crashed into the North Sea, had they died before reaching England? Now, finally, he knows. Franz sets down the paper, overwhelmed, tears fill his eyes. Then he takes out a pen, and writes 4 words on a blank sheet of paper. I was the one. January 18, 1990, Miami, Florida. A letter arrives in Charlie Brown's mailbox. The return address reads, Vancouver, Canada. Inside, he unfolds the paper. Dear Charlie, I read your story. I was the one. Franz Stigler. Charlie stares at the page, his hands trembling. After 47 years, the faceless man from his nightmares now has a name that he runs to the phone, dials the number at the bottom of the letter. A voice answers, older, accented, warm, hello. Is this Franz Stigler? Yes. Is this Charlie Brown? The silence that follows is heavy, not awkward, but sacred. Two men, once enemies, breathing on opposite ends of a line, connected by a single moment frozen in history. That evening, they speak for hours. Franz tells Charlie what he saw that day, the B-17 torn apart, the wounded crew fighting to keep each other alive. He explains why he couldn't fire. They were helpless, Franz says. They were no different than men hanging from parachutes. To kill them would not be war. It would be murder. He recalls the words of his old commander, Gustav Rodel, honor above everything. That day, mercy had been his act of honor. He tells Charlie he tried to signal them to land in Germany, or in Sweden for medical aid, but the bomber kept flying west. So he followed them, shielding them from German anti-aircraft fire, until the coast. Then he saluted and turned back, knowing what it might cost him. Charlie listens, eyes wet. For decades, he had relived that moment as a blur of chaos and fear. Now, it was human again. Real. The German had a voice, a name, a reason. When the call ends, Charlie sits in silence for a long time. Outside, the Miami night hums softly. For the first time in 47 years, the war inside him grows quiet. June 21, 1990, Seattle, Washington. The morning light spills across the runway at Boeing Field. A thin mist rolls over the tarmac as two elderly men, both veterans of the skies, prepare to meet for the first time. The air carries the smell of rain, oil, and jet fuel. For Charlie Brown, it feels like stepping back into history. For Franz Stigler, it feels like walking toward a ghost. 10:12 hours. Charlie waits near a small hangar, holding a copy of the photo his crew took after returning to England in 1943, the battered old pub, engine smoking, tail barely intact. He looks at it, then at the sky. A car pulls up, the door opens. An elderly man steps out, white hair combed neatly back, blue blazer with a Luftwaffe badge pinned discreetly inside the pocket. His walk is slow but proud. It's Franz. For a moment, neither speaks. They stand just a few feet apart. The American bomber pilot and the German fighter ace who once had him in his sights. Two men separated by war, bound by mercy. Then Charlie takes a step forward. Franz does the same. Their hands meet, firm, trembling, and in an instant, the decades between them disappear. Charlie, you're the reason I'm still here. Franz, no, Charlie, maybe you're the reason I still believe in God. They embrace. The hangar falls silent. Only the faint hum of distant aircraft fills the air, a reminder of the sky they both once called home. They sit together over coffee, surrounded by restored aircraft from the Second World War. 4 hours, they trade memories. Charlie recalls the freezing wind over Bremen, the dying engines, the wounded men lying on the floor of the bomber. Franz recounts his life in the Luftwaffe. 487 missions, the loss of his brother, the moral exhaustion of a war that devoured everything it touched. I joined the Luftwaffe for my country, he says quietly, but near the end, I flew for my friends. For survival. For decency, not for Hitler. He tells Charlie about that day, how he had seen the B-17 from above, ready to strike, and then saw the crew inside, the co-pilot slumped over, the tail gunner bleeding, the wings shredded. He couldn't pull the trigger. You were men fighting for your lives, Franz says. There was no honor in killing you. Charlie nods, his throat tight. All these years, he had imagined that mercy is luck. Now he understood it as choice. At a quiet restaurant, surrounded by family, Charlie raises a glass. He toasts the man who once could have ended his life, to Franz Stigler, the enemy who became my brother. The room falls silent for a heartbeat, then applause breaks out. Franz lowers his head, overcome, tears glisten in his eyes. We were soldiers, he says softly, but we never stopped being human. Over the next days, they drive together through Washington's countryside. They visit an air museum, walking side by side among the relics of their youth, Messerschmitts, Spitfires, B-17s, each aircraft a ghost from another time. Franz runs his hand along the wing of a restored B-17. His voice shakes. I remember your plane. Holes everywhere. I thought it would fall apart before the coast. Charlie smiles faintly. It nearly did. They both laugh, the kind of laughter that comes only after decades of pain. June 23, 1990, 9:40 hours, the two veterans attend a public air show. Spectators gather as a formation of vintage aircraft flies overhead. Among them, a B-17 circles gracefully, sunlight glinting off its wings. As the bomber passes, Franz instinctively raises his right hand. The same salute he gave in 1943. Charlie mirrors him. The crowd claps, not understanding the depth of that gesture, but for the two men beneath those planes, it is everything. Forgiveness, gratitude, redemption. Charlie turns to Franz. Why did you risk it? You could have been court-martialed. Executed. Franz looks down, thinking, then he says quietly, because I couldn't have lived with myself if I did nothing. That in war, we are told to follow orders. But sometimes, your heart must decide which ones to obey. That night, Charlie writes in his journal, I met the man who spared my life. He is not my enemy, he is my brother. The war ended long ago, but peace began today. In the years that followed, Charlie and Franz became inseparable. They called each other often. Birthdays, anniversaries, holidays, they spoke at schools and air museums, telling their story of compassion in war. They appeared together at veteran gatherings, one wearing an American flag pin, the other a Luftwaffe emblem, standing side by side as symbols of reconciliation. Audiences wept as they told their tale, how a simple act of mercy had bridged a chasm between enemies. The real victory, Franz once said, is not in killing, but in remembering our humanity. 1991. 1 year after their reunion, they attend a ceremony honoring both Allied and Axis veterans. As they stand before a crowd of hundreds, Charlie tells their story once more. When he finishes, he places his hand on Franz's shoulder. He was supposed to shoot me down, Charlie says. Instead, he taught me what it means to live. The audience rises to its feet in silence, a standing ovation not for soldiers, but for two men who chose decency over hatred. For the first time since the war, both men feel free. They stand together watching planes cross the dark sky. The lights blink faintly, like distant stars. Franz sighs, strange, isn't it? After all those missions, the only one that truly mattered was the one where I didn't fire. Charlie nods. Maybe mercy was the only thing worth fighting for. They shake hands again before parting for the night. Two pilots from opposite sides of the war, now brothers bound by a single act of grace. 1992, Miami, Florida. Nearly 50 years since the skies over Bremen, Colonel Charlie Brown, now 70, sits in his living room with a cup of black coffee and a thick stack of letters. Every week, he receives mail from across the world, veterans, students, historians, all moved by the story of two pilots who chose compassion over vengeance. Across the border, in Vancouver, Franz Stigler begins his mornings the same way. A letter from Charlie, a laugh shared over the phone, a memory revisited. They talk like brothers now, not of battle, but of life. May 3, 1992, Vancouver. Franz stands at his workbench, polishing a model of a B-17 that he paints the name carefully on the side. Ye old pub next to it, he sets a miniature Messerschmitt Bf 109. Side by side, forever in peace. It's strange, he writes to Charlie that night. I spent most of my life trying to forget the war, but meeting you helped me remember the good that survived it. August 1993, Seattle. Charlie and Franz meet again at an aviation reunion. Hundreds of veterans gather under hangars filled with restored aircraft, polished aluminum gleaming under the sunlight. Some of the men recognize the two immediately. One American veteran, shaking their hands, whispers, "You two are living proof that decency never dies." The crowd applauds as they take the stage. Charlie begins his speech softly, his voice heavy with emotion. We were enemies for 9 minutes in 1943, but we've been brothers for the rest of our lives. Franz smiles beside him, eyes glistening. That he speaks next, his German accent thick but steady. War makes us forget we are all human. That day, I remembered. The audience is silent, some in tears, others nodding slowly, understanding what those words truly mean. Winter, 1994, Vancouver. The snow falls quietly outside Franz's window. He sits by the fire, writing another letter. His health is beginning to fail, but his spirit remains unbroken. Charlie, he writes, I often think of that day. Sometimes I ask myself what would have happened if I had pulled the trigger. But then I remember your face when we met, and I know I made the right choice. He ends the letter with 3 words, "Forever your brother." Charlie reads the letter under the dim glow of a lamp that he smiles, then looks toward a framed photograph on the wall, the picture of the 2 of them standing in front of a restored B-17. Below it, engraved in brass, are the words, "Enemies once. Brothers forever." 1995, Washington, D.C.at the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum. Charlie and Franz are invited to speak before a new exhibit on wartime aviation ethics. Before hundreds of attendees, they recount their story, not of guns or glory, but of mercy and conscience. Charlie tells the crowd, in war, every man believes he's doing the right thing. But only those who keep their humanity truly win. Franz adds quietly, honor is not about medals. It's about what you choose to do when no one is watching. When they finish, the audience rises, not as Americans or Germans, but as human beings. That day, their story becomes more than memory, it becomes a message. 1996, Vancouver. Charlie visits Franz for the first time at his home. They sit together on the porch, overlooking the Pacific. The sea wind is cold, but they feel warm. They speak of their families, of aging, of the men they once were. "Do you ever wish we were young again?" Charlie asks. Franz shakes his head, "No. I think we were meant to grow old, so we could tell the story." As the sun dips below the horizon, they share a long silence. Neither man feels the need to speak. They have already said everything that mattered. 1998, Miami. Charlie suffers a mild heart attack. Doctors warn him to slow down. Franz calls him every few days. "Don't you dare die before me." He jokes, "We have a few more speeches to give." Charlie laughs weakly. "We'll go together. One more formation flight." 1999, Oshkosh Air Show, Wisconsin. Both men appear together for the last major time in public. Tens of thousands gather to watch the vintage aircraft take to the sky, the rumble of engines echoing across the field. Charlie and Franz sit side by side in folding chairs, smiling like boys again. A B-17 thunders overhead. Behind it, a single Messerschmitt replica joins formation. The 2 planes circle the field in perfect harmony. A living symbol of forgiveness. Charlie leans toward Franz. "Look at that," he says softly. "We made it, didn't we?" Franz nods, tears welling in his eyes. "Yes, Charlie, we did." 2001, Vancouver. Franz's health declines further. His hands tremble when he writes now, but every letter to Charlie still ends the same way. "To my brother of the sky." 2004, Miami, Florida. Charlie receives the news, Franz Stigler has passed away peacefully in his home, aged 88. He sits quietly for a long time, staring at the last photo they took together, both of them smiling, holding hands beneath the wing of a B-17. He whispers, "Rest easy, brother. You already flew higher than most men ever will." Charlie sends a message to Franz's family. He died as he lived, with honor, courage, and kindness. The world is smaller without him. He places Franz's photo on his mantle, beside the medals from his service. Then he adds something new, a small German Luftwaffe pin Franz had once given him that he keeps it there for the rest of his life. 2008, Miami. 4 years later, Charlie Brown passes away at the age of 86. At his funeral, 2 flags rest side by side, the stars and stripes, and the flag of the old Luftwaffe. They flutter together in the warm Florida wind. One of Charlie's grandsons reads aloud a letter found among his belongings. "War separated us by duty, but mercy made us brothers. Let the skies remember us not for what we destroyed, but for what we spared." The guests stand in silence. Somewhere, it feels as if 2 planes fly side by side again, one bearing white stars, the other a black cross, both heading home. Years later, their story spreads across classrooms, documentaries, and books. It becomes a symbol of what humanity can be, even in its darkest hour. Historians call it the miracle over Bremen. Pilots call it the gentleman's salute. But those who knew Charlie and Franz simply call it friendship. "I looked for my enemy and found my friend. The man I feared most taught me the greatest truth, that mercy can outlast any war." The ink fades on the page, but their story never does. March 22, 2008, Vancouver, Canada. The rain falls softly on the roof of a small suburban home. Inside, Franz Stigler takes his final breath. A photograph rests beside his bed, 2 men in uniform, smiling beneath the wing of a B-17 bomber. On the back, written in blue ink, "My brother of the sky, forever." He was 92 years old. For the man who once flew through hell and refused to kill, peace has finally landed. November 24, 2008, Miami, Florida. 8 months later, Charlie Brown passes away. He was 86. At his funeral, his children place 2 flags on the casket, one American, one German, side by side. Above them, a folded note found in his desk drawer reads, "Franz and I never fought for the same country, but we fought for the same thing, our souls." The crowd stands in silence. Old veterans, young airmen, and families gather as the sound of a flyover echoes through the sky. 2 planes, one marked with stars, the other with a black cross, fly wing to wing over the cemetery, then break formation, one climbing, one descending, disappearing into the clouds. 2012, Seattle, Washington. A book hits the shelves. A higher call by Adam Makos and Larry Alexander. It tells their story in full, the mercy in the skies, the 47-year search, the friendship that defied war. Within months, it becomes a bestseller. Schools, historians, and veterans begin sharing their story across the world. Documentaries are made, air shows reenact that moment over Bremen, and 2 names echo through history once more, Charlie Brown and Franz Stigler. But what captures people most is not the battle, it's the mercy. Black and white film flickers across the screen. A younger Charlie stands beside his crew in 1943. The camera pans to the bullet holes in the fuselage of ye old pub. The narrator's voice cuts through the static. 10 men lived because one enemy remembered his humanity. The shot fades to a photo, 2 old men embracing nearly 5 decades later, the same eyes, the same bond. Enemies turn brothers. A crowd gathers as a restored Bf 109 flies in formation with AB 17 for the first time since the war. Below, a banner unfurls in both English and German. Mercy knows no borders. Veterans watch in tears, children clap as the 2 aircraft thunder across the blue sky. Somewhere, you can almost imagine Charlie and Franz watching, smiling from above. For nearly half a century, silence separated them, but when they found each other, forgiveness became their final mission. At museums across the US and Germany, their photographs hang side by side, Franz in his Luftwaffe uniform, Charlie in his flight jacket, both young, both staring straight into the camera. Underneath, the caption reads, "Enemies by duty, brothers by choice." A high school student records a presentation on World War II ethics. On the screen behind him is a single black and white image, a Messerschmitt flying beside a shattered B-17, not firing. He quotes Charlie Brown's final words from his diary, "Mercy is not weakness. It's strength, the kind of strength that ends wars." The classroom goes silent. In that moment, 2 men who lived 8 decades earlier teach humanity again. At a small aviation museum, a new exhibit opens, The Gentleman of the Sky. Inside, a section of ye old pub's fuselage gleams under soft light. Next to it, a Bf 109 propeller, worn and scarred by time. 2 uniforms rest behind glass, one olive drab, one gray-blue. Visitors stand quietly, reading the story on the plaque. On December 20, 1943, above Bremen, Germany, 2 enemies met. One chose mercy over victory, the other chose gratitude over hate. Together, they proved that even in war, humanity can still fly. December 20, 1943. A crippled bomber limps across the frozen skies of Germany. A German ace lines up for the kill, then lowers his guns. 2 lives diverge. 2 men go home. 47 years pass, and then, 2 brothers find each other again. In the end, we all live under the same sky, Franz once said. The only difference is what we choose to see when we look up. The screen fades to black, the sound of engines hums faintly, echoing into the distance, then silence.